You know, as church leaders, we must keep our teams optimistic, flexible, and focused on those essential ministries right now that absolutely have to happen. We need to help them shift their mind to a we got to make this work approach rather than derailing themselves and others by why it can't work. Now, that's not everybody, but about a third of your people are still likely responding to this crisis with a we can't do this essential ministry because blank. And we need to help them shift their minds to see we can if we do it in a different way. Now, this is another tool from A Beautiful Constraint by Morgan and Barden. And it's a great way to help even the most cantankerous keeper of the status quo on your team see problems and their solutions in a new light. And as I walk you around the tool, don't fall in love with the first strategic idea that comes along. Be sure to walk all the way around this map. And also note that many of these issues you're trying to solve will likely have multiple layers, that you won't just go around it once. You'll need to come back around the map a time or two to resolve each layer of the problem and end up with that solid solution that you're looking for. So let's take this walk I keep talking about, shall we? So you want to start with your chosen we can't because premise. Put it there in your mind and let's see if we can shake out a solution. So given our last session, I think I see a great place for us to start right here. We can if we resource it by blank. Now, this is all about us making strategic trade-offs and shifting resources that we currently have freed up from our last experience together. It's also about potentially tapping into new resources as well. Now, when we move to the next one here, we can if we substitute X for Y. Keep in mind that the Y right here is that we can't because blank. We can't have a worship service because our federal, state, or local government prohibits it. It's one that we've dealt with recently. But we can if we do it digitally. And so many churches did and have. And so we use that one unknowingly. But I would encourage you not just to use it for your worship service or your groups, but think about pushing that further down into your church as well. All right. Next, we can if we remove blank to allow us to blank. Again, this is about simplicity, and simplicity is so important at this time. What you stop doing is way more important than what you start doing at a time like this. This also is a chance for you to simplify a process or remove steps from a process that may be causing friction at this time. Now, the next one is we can if we introduce a blank. And this is usually about introducing a new element to something that already exists. Perhaps it's replacing something that's just not effective given the crisis that we're in right now. It could be creating something new altogether, but I want to give you a word of caution here. Keep in mind, don't do something just because the cool church down the road is doing a new thing and doing it in this way. Make sure that it is meeting an important, essential need of your church, or don't do it. Next, let's take a look at this one. We can if we think of it as blank. Now, remember how Jesus taught his disciples? He did that through the power of story and metaphor, because metaphor breaks down your patterns of thinking and makes you see it in a new light. We talked about the great commandment earlier. We all know what it is. Love thy neighbor as thyself. And do you remember Jesus' response to who is my neighbor? He said a man was on his way down from Jerusalem to Jericho, and we get the story. And frankly, we have the story of the Good Samaritan, a metaphor that is a very powerful tool in breaking down our understanding of how to live out the gospel. And wow, metaphor is that powerful tool to help us experience breakthrough, both spiritually, personally, but it can also be used in this instant as well. We can if we use other people to blank. Now you have a tremendous opportunity in your church to build an army, not just an audience during this crisis. And remember that at a time like this, more people are ready to volunteer and serve and step up. And you can also upskill your staff and congregation to meet the needs of these essential ministries as we uncover them, and do so in short order, especially with a tool like the one you're on right now. Let's let's be realistic here. We have strategic pathways for every leadership level of your church in every ministry area of your church. So while you're here, take a look around. The next one is we can if we mix together blank and blank. Now, this formula is all about combining two things together in a new way. And you should naturally look for strategic overlaps of groups of people or purpose here. So parents and children's, for example, may normally be served by two different areas of the church. You may want to combine those at this time. Or a purpose like discipleship that runs across every age, stage, and level of your church. You may want to look at that one at this time too. Next, we can if we fund it by blank. Now, this is getting down to the nitty-gritty of locating new resources of funding. This is anything from budget reallocation to strategic campaigns, getting lines of credit, liquidating assets or refinancing debt. You may even be able to barter for it. But get creative and think about how you might leverage non-traditional assets that you have at your disposal as well. And P.S. also note that we have a whole session coming up on contingency budgets and reopening plans and reallocation. It includes several templates for you to customize for your church. So if you haven't already created a task force that's walking through this whole course, I would suggest that you at least do a working group on this session and walk through this We Can framework like we just did. I get that you or some of your leaders may not need a tool like this because of your frame of mind or your posture right now, but using this tool and framework is so amazingly simple and, dare I say, quite savvy in its approach, because you may not have noticed this, but by starting each sentence with "we can if," you keep the group focused on how it might be possible, not whether or not if it's possible. And framing it in this way forces people to find more solutions and move forward rather than to find more problems, which keeps a lead team more optimistic. Now, using this framework also and using the tool connected with it is probably going to result in upsetting your apple cart a bit if yours hasn't been all upset already. So now is a great time to talk about aligning some of these new strategies and maybe even restructuring your staff to get those apples back in the cart.